Ed, you're looking very presidential.
Thank you.
Hello.
I'm sitting in my square office.
How do you make the keyboard not shut off in 30 seconds? Display and brightness?
Good to go, Joe.
Darn it. Let's see. Figure out how to make this not turn off. I used to know how to do it. Yeah. All right, May 26, 2020 special meeting of the Monroe County Legislature will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Alcoffer.
Here.
Mr. Alcoffer's here. Mr. Ansello.
Here.
Mr. Ansello is here. Ms. Barnhart.
Here.
Ms. Barnhart is here. Mr. Baroff.
Here.
Mr. Baroff is here. Mr. Baines.
Here.
Mr. Baines is here. Ms. Boyce.
Here.
Ms. Boyce is here. Mr. Brew.
Here.
Mr. Brew is here. President Carbone.
Here.
President Carbone is here. Mr. Delahanty. Mr. Delahanty.
Here.
Mr. Delahanty is here. Mr. Florio.
Here.
Mr. Florio is here. Mr. Dondorfer.
Here.
Mr. Dondorfer is here. Mr. Felder.
Here.
Mr. Felder is here. Mr. Flagler Mitchell.
Here.
Mr. Flagler Mitchell is here. Ms. Hassman.
Here.
Hassman is here. Mr. Hebert.
Here.
Mr. Hebert is here. Mr. Keofet Lacey.
Here.
Mr. Keofet Lacey is here. Ms. Lamar.
Here.
Ms. Lamar is here. Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Lee is here. Mr. Mafucci.
Here.
Mr. Mafucci is here. Mr. Marionetti.
Here.
Mr. Marionetti is here. Mr. Morelli.
Here.
Mr. Morelli is here. Ms. Roman. Ms. Roman is excused. Ms. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Smith is here. Ms. Taylor.
Here.
Ms. Taylor is here. Mr. Turp.
Here.
Mr. Turp is here. Mr. Wilcox. Mr. Wilt.
Here.
Mr. Udelson.
Here.
Mr. Udelson is here. Mr. Zale.
Here.
Mr. Zale is here.
Very good. We'll need to suspend the rules of the legislature for the purpose of prohibiting public in-person attendance in accordance with Executive Order 202.1, issued by Governor Cuomo on March 12, 2020. You have a motion before you, which is moved by Legislator Brew and seconded by Legislator Zale. This is a non-debatable motion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Please join me in a moment of silent prayer. Please keep in your thoughts our first responders, those working in the medical community, and everyone who is supporting the community response to COVID-19. Please join Legislator Baroff as he leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the
To the flag
of the
of the United States of America,
to the
to the
republic
republic
for
for which it stands,
one
one nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with
liberty,
liberty,
justice.
Justice
for all.
I call this special meeting of the legislature pursuant to the authority vested in me as president of the Monroe County Legislature by section C2-9C1 of the county charter and section 545-5 of the rules of the legislature of the county of Monroe. This meeting has been closed to the public and all legislators are participating via teleconference in accordance with Executive Order 202.1. In keeping with the legislature's tradition of openness, the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube through the legislature's official channel. Everyone participating via video or teleconference will please mute their devices except to obtain the floor or cast a vote. If seeking to obtain the floor, please simply state your name and wait for me to call on you before proceeding with your questions or statement. The clerk will read the full title of each resolution and referral to avoid any confusion as to which item is before the legislature. All votes will be held via voice vote unless a roll call is requested. Following the conclusion of consideration on the three matters of urgency, we will entertain a motion to recess the special meeting and convene a committee of the whole. In doing so, we will also discharge those items currently referred to committee and commit them to the committee of the whole. All legislators will be members of the committee of the whole and able to participate in debate and vote on items regardless of their respective committee assignments or which committees the referral was initially assigned. The committee of the whole will be governed by the same rules of the legislature that govern committee meetings, and the votes taken are equivalent to those taken in committee, meaning items passed by the committee of the whole will be considered for final approval or appropriate action at the May legislature. We will now hold the public forum. Mr. Clerk.
No one is registered to address the legislature, nor were any written comments submitted.
We will now proceed with the consideration of motions, resolutions, and notices. Will the clerk read the next item on the agenda, please?
Item number 1, referral 20-0198, authorizing contract with Quest Diagnostics Incorporated to provide employees and contractors of Monroe Community Hospital with COVID-19 testing to comply with New York State Governor's Executive Order 202.30 as it relates to the COVID-19 state of emergency.
Move, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Hebert, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. This is to adopt. Is there any discussion?
This is Legislator Mike Zale.
Yes, Legislator Zale.
Through you, Mr. President, to the administration, I have a question regarding the Quest Diagnostics Incorporated and any other industries that may have been under consideration for this referral. I guess it's really a two-part question. The first part is that I remember a concern that came up regarding this specific company in the early onset of testing and diagnostic testing. So my first question through the president to the administration is, do we still have similar concerns that were brought up through the Department of Health regarding this specific company, the timeliness of the tests, information sharing, things of that nature. And I guess I'll just wait for the second question then.
This is Alyssa Tallow from Monroe Community Hospital. Through the president, Quest Diagnostics was actually identified by the state to be the lab of choice for all facilities in Monroe County to have their testing performed through.
Thank you. Through the president to the administration, I think my question still remains. There were some early concerns that were brought up by Dr. Mendoza regarding this organization. I certainly know nothing different and certainly not an expert in this field. My question is, through the president to the administration, are all of these concerns that were present and vocalized early, have those concerns been alleviated?
Mr. President, this is Jeff McCann. Good evening. With regard to Legislator Zale's questions, I believe through you there was some concern raised that at some of the testing facilities it run by Quest, that it was taking a long period of time to get the test results back. Again, given the fact that the state has identified them as the regional administrator of these tests, we do not believe that that will be a problem for these tests. And if it is, it's something we will monitor and deal with, but we do not expect it to be a problem.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, this is Legislator Boyce. Through the president, follow-up question to Mr. McCann with regards to Quest. Can you tell us how many tests are pending right now, and how much are the tests per test that we're paying for?
Mr. President, through you, I would defer to Ms. Tallow to address that.
This is Alyssa Tallow from Monroe Community Hospital. The test each is $100 per test, which after discussing with different labs in the area is what they are charging as well for the test. As far as tests that are pending, we started testing at the facility on Friday, this past Friday, and we already have results coming through from tests performed on Friday and Saturday. As far as specific numbers for what tests are pending, I do not know the specific numbers of those that have not been resulted yet.
This is Legislator Brew.
Yes, Legislator Brew, you have the floor.
Yes, to the president, could you describe how the frequency and how these tests will be administered? Will it be a once and done for all the employees, or will employees or certain category of employees be retested on a periodic basis?
This is Alyssa from MCH. Through the president, staff are required to be tested weekly. Staff that work 4 days or more at the facility are required to be tested twice weekly. If they work 3 days or less, they are required to be tested once weekly. If an employee previously tested positive, it does not matter. They still are required to be tested per the executive order.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Carries. Next item, please.
Item number 2, referral 20-0199, creating 6 new positions in Monroe County Board of Elections and amending 2020 operating budget.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Bruce, seconded by Legislator Felder. This is to adopt. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Baines.
Legislator Barnhart.
Legislator Baines.
Legislator Baines, go ahead, you have the floor.
Through you, Mr. President, to the Majority Leader and the Minority Leader. What reports or data, requests of capacity and need was received by the leadership before this proposal, this referral was put together? Could you share that, please?
Yes, Mr. Baines, through communications to the Republican side of the Board of Elections, I have been aware of the previous manpower shortfalls, as well as the current manpower shortfalls in the Board of Elections, starting as about, I would say about 2 years ago on until now. It's been common knowledge amongst many of us. I have not received any formal notification, but I do believe that we may have the election commissioners on a member of the meeting here tonight, and that they might be able to answer any specific questions.
Well, to follow up, Majority Leader, I do have some specific questions, because this is a proposal to spend about $225,000 a year. The legacy costs for this proposal in terms of salary, pension, and support dollars for the next 10 years are in the multi-millions. And we are in a fiscal crisis in our county. And for us to act on, with no notice today, on this referral and encumber that kind of commitment by the taxpayers without any objective, what business operates this way? So through you to Mr. President, to the Majority Leader and the Minority Leader, I would welcome some data and some analysis of why this need is suddenly so pressing from our election commissioners.
Yes, Mr. Baines, I would suggest inviting either one of the election commissioners to chime in here. And I'm sure as a follow-up, they would be happy to provide the justifications regarding the additional employees.
Are any of the election commissioners on the call?
Does anybody in attendance at this meeting know whether or not current positions have not been filled? I've heard a lot of talk about this, but I don't listen to talk. I believe we need facts and data. So through you to the Majority Leader and the Minority Leader, Mr. President, do we have positions that are currently not filled in this office, and now we're creating more positions? Is that accurate?
Mr. Legislator Baines, I am not aware of the current vacancy status of the Board of Elections. All that I am aware of are the 6 positions as requested by the 2 commissioners.
Well, I apologize for being so persistent, but I want to declare, I don't know what the time is to explain my vote, but I'll be voting no on this. And I think if the election commissioners really thought this was necessary, they not only would have provided us with something in writing, some description of the need, they'd actually be here. So I'll be voting no on this before end of the
Legislator Barnhart.
Go ahead, Legislator Barnhart. Wait 1 second. Legislator Felder, do you have anything to add on those questions?
The only thing I will say is that we all understand that outside of COVID-19, that beginning last year when the state legislature decided for certain reasons to move the primaries from September to June, it changed the timetable for the election. We also know that even though it did not make it into the legislation last year, that there is a move to go to no fault absentee balloting in the state of New York. And currently, because of the executive orders with that the governor has brought down, and with the moving of the presidential primary from April to June, it has created an additional need for certain things. and as far as I know, that the Board of Elections has hired extra people to deal with the absentee ballots. But in terms of the administrative part of it, there's a new reality in the Board of Elections, and that new reality requires a new way of staffing and looking at how they do business. And I guess that's what I would have to say about it. You know, and Monroe County has always been known as one of the leaders in terms of the Board of Elections in the state of New York. And I think this is an attempt on their part to make sure they continue to be ahead of the curve and not behind the curve as we continue to deal with these new realities regarding elections as we move into the future.
Thank you, Legislator Felder. I think we have Commissioner Nicolay on, correct?
Yes, Mr. President, LaShawna Boose and I are both here together.
Okay, Legislator Baines, would you like to address your questions, please?
Thank you, Mr. President. Election Commissioner, when we spend this kind of money with legacy costs in the millions over the next 10 years, it's very important that we understand with data the nature of the need and precisely why we would be hiring 6 supervisors at this time as a matter of urgency. And I would also ask, as a second question, is it a fact that we currently have positions that are not filled on both sides of the election commissioner aisle? Because if it is, it seems to me that now we're creating 6 positions to fill. So if you could speak to those 2 questions through you, Mr. President, to our election commissioners, I would appreciate it.
Through the president, yes, it is true that we do have a few vacant positions, definitely on the Republican side, possibly one on the Democratic side. The most challenging part about filling those positions is that they are Group 5s and Group 3s. And for those of you who don't know, that pays about $13 an hour or $14 an hour. And it is very challenging to find someone who is qualified to work here at that price point, honestly. And they also have to pay for parking, and there's a variety of things. So it's not that we haven't tried to fill those lower paid positions, but it is difficult. And the other reason that these are more of a supervisory role or more of an administrative role is because, frankly, the Board of Elections, and we apologize if you talked about this a little bit, we were tardy to the meeting start, but the Board of Elections of 20 years ago is not the Board of Elections of today. There were 50 changes to election law in 2019. That is more changes in election law than anyone had seen in the past 30 years, prior 30 years. And in addition to that, we've had a dozen executive orders this spring related to COVID. So we are really, we are running uphill. We are trying to accommodate 256,000 eligible voters with absentee ballots for just the primary. And we're doing it with a very small, very underpaid staff, frankly. And if we are required to do the same for the general election, we will be in the numbers of 450,000 voters, trying to accommodate them for absentee voting. And in addition, it's not just absentee voting. We also are required to hold 10 days of early voting and day of voting on election day. And those things are all happening simultaneously.
In addition to the fact that I'd also like to add, as far as our training department, with early voting, we introduced new technology, which then required for us to train over 3,000 inspectors. So with that being said, this year will be the first year that we actually implement the new technology during the primary election, which means we still have to train new people. In fact, we're training new people because of COVID, because we just haven't had the participation and we haven't had the ability to ensure that folks are now comfortable with using this technology. So we have to move in a forward direction to ensure that we continue to have qualified staff, not only to work our polling sites, but qualified staff that are comfortable with training our poll workers on this new technology.
Thank you.
Legislator Barnhart.
Go ahead, Legislator Barnhart. Legislator Barnhart, you have the floor.
Thank you. Through the president to the elections commissioners, do any of these titles currently exist?
No. Through the president, they do not.
Through the president, if the staff is so overburdened and we're drowning in absentee ballots, why are we only creating supervisor positions?
Through the president, LaShawna and I have worked with the Human Resources Department, and they have graciously allowed us to hire 4 times the number of seasonal employees that we have. So right now we have approximately 24-ish. I'll call them college students. They're not all college students, but a lot of them are, who are literally typing 8 hours a day, or 10 hours a day, some of them, doing data entry to try to process all of these absentee ballot applications. In my opinion, one of the things that could be done much better in the Board of Elections is finding a more efficient way to process these moving forward. I have only been here a short time, and we got a lot of tasks required of us in a short time, so it was not the right time for me to reinvent the wheel. So we are pedaling as fast as we can, and so we have hired. We got right on it and hired 24 or so young people that are in here working really hard for us every day. But moving forward, we need people that have more expertise in data management, more expertise in training, so that technology, so that we are not doing this again. Even in November, I would hope to have something better, but year after year, we need to start moving into the modern world with technology. We're doing things the same way they've been done for 30 years here. It's just not efficient. It's not efficient.
Through the president to the elections commissioners, what is the job description for the assistant deputy elections commissioners? I noticed that their pay would be $76,000 to $98,000 in that range. What do you expect them to do, and why do you need these 2 jobs?
Well, honestly, I would say that those job descriptions would be as fluid as the commissioners and the deputies are, which is essentially to manage the department and execute the elections process. So at this point, on my side of the aisle, I definitely need someone with a technology background that can help, move us into the current generation of data. We're really lacking there. But it would also be someone to monitor contracts. We're spending a tremendous amount of money right now with a print and a mail house because we are unable to do this stuff in-house. That person I would see, making sure that we're getting the best deal, that they're following up with them to make sure that, they're doing what we're paying them to do. And because, right, and everything we do here is bipartisan, and LaShawna and I have tried really hard to make sure that we double check each other's work and we make joint decisions. But right now, the people that do the data, the IT people, there's not really Republican representation on that part, and on the flip side for training, it tends to be mostly Republicans and not Democrats. And we need to make sure that we are sharing the work and we are sharing the responsibility. So I think those assistant deputies would be, to be in someone's stead. If LaShawna couldn't be here for some reason, or Nancy, my deputy, couldn't be here. And maybe it's the COVID that's happening right now, but we have people who are out on long-term leave, a few that are honestly afraid to come to work, and there's no backup plan right now.
You need the backup to the backup
right.
to the backup.
Right. And
to the president, to the commissioners. So you want someone with a tech background for these assistant deputy commissioner positions. So have you offered these jobs to anyone, and do they actually have this kind of background?
We haven't offered any. That would be premature to offer a job to anyone that doesn't exist right now. So no, we don't. They're not posted or anything. This is,
You haven't
after your honorable body decides.
Okay, so through the president to the elections commissioners, you have not identified anyone to take these positions at this point in time.
No. Correct.
To the commissioners, why aren't the jobs a one-to-one Democrat Republican as they usually are?
That would be something. Through the president, from what I understand, from what Lisa and I understand on how the office was designed, all decisions made as it pertains to the structure of this office were things that were done by the commissioners at the time. So when we talk about restructuring the office right now, we're solely talking about restructuring this office and adding positions based on the fact that we've been faced with over 50 election law updates, over 15 executive orders where we as an office have not made any changes in the past 20 years.
Through the president to the elections commissioners, I mean, it's your jobs to understand what those laws are and to make those updates. What does it mean to recoup the 2021 chargeback? What does that mean in the legislation?
That's a great question.
Through the president, just for clarification, are you talking about the way that the county board of elections is paid for?
It says in the legislation, quote, the cost of these positions will be recouped via the 2021 chargeback for election services. I just don't know what that means, right. And I was hoping you could explain it.
Sure. So everything that is spent in the Board of Elections, the county fronts the money, and then when the end of the year comes, I believe a bill is sent, divided up to every town and the city, and they're distributed that way, and that's how the board is paid for.
So through the president to the elections commissioner, so we're borrowing against next year's money?
No, it's a chargeback. So we're not really borrowing. You're fronting the money, and then the taxpayers are paying it. And the reason it's set up that way is because every year it's different. If there's a presidential year, the chargeback is much higher than if it's just a local year, and so on. And this year, it's probably going to be much greater just because of all of these additional expenses.
I just have one other question, and then I'll explain my vote. Just going back to all the seasonal temp workers that you've hired, it seems like, if you perhaps more clerks, data entry positions would be needed, but instead we're creating 4 permanent supervisor positions. Can you just explain one more time why you need fewer permanent worker bees, but more permanent supervisors?
Sure. Through the president, we're using the title supervisor in all of those. One is just a senior trainer, mostly because the people who are in each of those divisions, there is not a lead person. So for example, right now, the permanent employees in absentee, which is a division of the board, has 4 people. 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. They are not, the highest paid person is a group 7. And they hold titles of clerks. They're all clerks. Right, clerks. So for us specifically, and I apologize for interrupting Commissioner Polito-Nicolay, but the titles are things that we just wanted to clarify as far as that department having a specific point of contact, where right now there's no specific point of contact. So when a project comes through, specifically how we've seen things operate with the absentee department, there's not one point of contact. There's everyone looking to each other, which is good
for, the balance of how everything should work. However, with a project like what we've had and what we could potentially see with election law changes when no-fault absentee comes through, you're going to need a better system to manage when these applications come through, when the ballots start coming through, because they're all processes that have not been updated in the last 20-plus years.
Thank you so much.
So if the titles are an issue, okay.
No, that's fine. I really appreciate the time that you've taken to explain this. I share Legislator Bain's deep concern that this is being rushed. This sounds sort of like a restructuring. I'm also hearing a lot of blame on new regulations. You are supposed to be the experts, and sounds like you're bringing in supervisors to help you be the experts. I have a lot of concerns about this, and there's just some things that need to be said here. Right now, the Monroe County Legislature's Democratic Caucus is being sued because we are trying to circumvent democracy to, of all things, appoint a new
point of order, Mr. President. That's out of order, Mr. President.
I have a right to speak about my vote, and it absolutely directly relates to the patronage that we are seeing in this meeting and we are about to vote on, and I will be continuing. Now, we are trying to deny 1,800 members of the Democratic Party their right to vote on the position of Board of Elections Commissioner. And this is happening because of an effort to put one favored person into the job. And today, hours before,
this is out, Mr. President, this is out of order. This is out of order.
Legislator Barnhart, let's not bring the lawsuit in. Let's talk about just these jobs.
It's all related. It is all related. And if I'm allowed to speak, and if Minority Leader Felder didn't want me to do this, maybe he should have told us about this and called us about it before.
Yeah, but I don't care. But I'm telling you, I don't care what Legislator Felder says. I'm telling you, it doesn't pertain. Stick to the jobs, otherwise you're out of order.
It absolutely does, because this is not how the county should be conducting business.
Do you object? Do you want to object to my ruling, and we'll go to a roll call vote? Are you objecting to my ruling?
I will focus just on this point right now. I am getting there right now, and I will continue. Today we found out about another scheme by the same people that should make us embarrassed. The Board of Elections
could be about jobs.
Underpaid. Now they are drowning in absentee ballots, and yet here we are hiring 6 new supervisors, 2 of them highly paid, quote, assistant deputy commissioners, job titles that don't currently exist. We are not being asked to plug holes here. We're being asked to make new patronage jobs. Now, I heard from BOE workers today, many of whom have filed human resources complaints. They're outraged.
Mr. President,
we don't need bosses. Most of them do not get. Don't.
It's out of order.
They say they do not need new bosses, many of whom make more than they do to do the same jobs. They need help. Now, I figured maybe I should give the masterminds of this the benefit of the doubt. So I called Erie County, I called Onondaga County, and I called Albany County to find out how they're handling the COVID-19 pandemic. They didn't create 6 new supervisory positions. Guess what? They didn't create any new positions to deal with all of this. And if I was still a reporter, I would pick really fun quotes to put in my story about all of this. To the Republicans, congratulations, you finally got a Democrat to go along with something like this. But, I'm really disappointed with my own party. When I voted for a Democratic administration and were to get Democrats elected, I was working under the belief that we would not tolerate these types of shenanigans. Now, of course, governments have patronage jobs. Board of Elections have patronage jobs, but patronage goes off the rails when it's not in the interest of good government and only in the interest of a few people. And that's what we have here, and it's wrong. Now, I asked this body to at least strike the 2 assistant deputy commissioner positions, which are totally unnecessary and offensive in this environment where we have a hiring freeze and budget deficits and may have to lay people off. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I'd like to explain my vote.
Legislator Felder.
The most dangerous thing in any democracy is when one person appoints himself or herself to be the guardian of all that's holy and right and proper and legal and fair. Some people have a need to turn everything into a clown show and a circus show because it's all about them and grandstanding for their particular point of view and making themselves look good in the eyes of other people. The fact is we have a piece of legislation here that asks us to do something to that's forward-looking to help make sure that we have a board of elections that is efficient and operates properly. Now, people can nitpick about certain aspects of this and that, but to the claim that anytime someone does something I don't like, it is now patronage, it is now grandstanding, it is now some sort of cabal or something. It's not only is offensive, it's borderline slanderous. And I think we as legislators, we want to focus on, as Legislative Baines did, focus on the aspects of the legislation that are problematic and I guess in his eyes, that's fine. But these other, these slanderous accusations and bringing in the lawsuit and everything else, it's completely, beyond the pale. And it just shows us the kind of people that we are dealing with. But I'll be voting in the affirmative on this, obviously.
Question. Or sorry, Legislator Mafucci. Legislator Mafucci. Well, you've had your hand up. I see it, but Legislator Felder wasn't done speaking. You're in high school. Don't worry, I see it. Legislator Mafucci, go ahead.
I just put my little lower hand up on this so you can actually see that. I realized
That's
that
great.
my colleague and leader was speaking. I do have a question, but first I do want to, Mr. President, I do want to express a little bit of frustration. And that is, this is a matter of urgency. So we have to do this tonight with not a lot of information. So my question goes like this. Apparently, these new expenses, which are not budgeted for, are going to go into chargebacks. Very interesting situation. Those are those 11 items that show up below the line that never end up in the tax levy or the tax rate. So we've been telling our constituents for years the wrong levy and the wrong rate. But I can park that for a second. What I need to know is this. If we increase our expenditures $220,000, do we bill the towns and villages in next year's budget? Or do they pay somehow now? I know they don't pay now. I can never get this answer. I asked this question many times. This like a retroactive charge? That's my question to the administration through the president.
The administration got that question?
Yep. Through you, Mr. President, this is Jennifer Cisterio from Finance.
Hi, Jennifer.
Yeah, hello. We would include that in tax bills next year.
Thank you. I have an additional question.
It would be a charge.
So here's, and I just want to make sure I understand this. This is the first time in 3 years I got an answer that I understand about chargebacks. So if we do this, if we actually fund these positions at the 11th hour, I hate doing that. The actual funding is going to go on the tax bills next year. So when we submit our tax cap compliance form showing our tax levy and then we compute the rate, we could have an additional $220,000 to pay for election expenses that get distributed to the towns on their tax bill. Is that correct, President of the Administration?
Through you, Mr. President, yes, that's correct.
Thank you. I have one final comment. I haven't decided yet how I'm voting, so I guess I'm a little frustrated. I don't know why we need to do this tonight. Why can't we do it at our next meeting? Because I do need a little more information to really understand why I'm expensing more dollars right now. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Yep, I have a question. This is Linda Hasman.
Yes, Legislator Hasman, you have the floor.
Through the president to the election commissioners, I'm just curious, do you have job descriptions for these new positions?
Through the president, we actually do not have job descriptions. We don't have job descriptions for any employees in the Board of Elections.
You don't have any job descriptions for people in the Board of Elections?
Yep, that's
Correct.
what you said, no doubt.
I'm startled by that. Oh, okay, I guess that's all I have.
Dr. Carbone.
Okay.
Dr. Coleman, one more point. This is the reason why I was talking about, I spoke earlier in my opening remarks about the need to bring the Board of Elections into the 21st century and actually to be forward-looking. To me, it's unconscionable that you could have an operation running like this where you're hiring people and don't have job descriptions. And so what the commissioners are trying to do now is actually trying to create some of this and create some accountability within the office so people know what they're supposed to be doing. And I think that's important.
Legislator Barnhart.
I believe Legislator Baines had his hand up before.
Thank you.
Did you have your hand up, Legislator Baines?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to table this matter until our regular meeting in June. I make that motion because it's clear from this conversation that we have a group of people who are attempting a reorganization. And the fact that they are not prepared, that they have not prepared job descriptions, they have not prepared a narrative, they have not prepared data for us. I don't want to cast aspersions on them for that. I want to give them the opportunity to do so. I would be willing to vote for this if I had proper information, not anecdotal conversations at a meeting. And so I make a motion to table this until our June meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to table.
I'll read the motion.
Pardon?
I'll want me to read the motion?
The motion is to table the referral to hire the 6 people for the Board of Elections. I think we have to go to a roll call vote. Yes upholds the motion to table, correct?
Yep, a yes is a vote to table. Mr. Brew?
No.
Mr. Felder?
No.
Mr. Alcoffer?
No.
Mr. Alcoffer votes no. Mr. Ansello?
No.
Mr. Ansello votes no. Ms. Barnhart?
Yes.
Ms. Barnhart votes yes. Mr. Broth?
Yes.
Mr. Broth votes yes. Mr. Baines?
Yes.
Mr. Baines votes yes. Ms. Boyce?
No.
Ms. Boyce votes no. Mr. Delahanty?
No.
Mr. Delahanty votes no. Mrs. DeFlorio?
No.
DeFlorio votes no. Mr. Dondorfer?
No.
Mr. Dondorfer votes no. Mr. Flagler Mitchell?
No.
Mr. Flagler Mitchell votes no. Ms. Hassman?
Yes.
Ms. Hassman votes yes. Mr. Hebert?
No.
Mr. Hebert votes no. Mr. Keofet-Lacey?
No.
Mr. Keofet-Lacey votes no. Ms. Lamar?
No.
Ms. Lamar votes no. Mr. Lee?
No.
Mr. Lee votes no. Mr. Mafucci?
Yes.
Mr. Mafucci votes yes. Mr. Marionetti?
No.
Mr. Marionetti votes no. Mr. Morelli?
Yes.
Mr. Morelli votes yes. Ms. Roman is excused. Ms. Smith?
No.
Ms. Smith votes no. Ms. Taylor?
No.
Ms. Taylor votes no. Mr. Turp?
No.
Mr. Turp votes no. Mr. Wilcox?
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox votes yes. Mr. Wilt?
No.
Mr. Wilt votes no. Mr. Udelson?
Yes.
Mr. Udelson votes yes. Mr. Zale?
No.
Mr. Zale votes no. President Carbone?
No.
President Carbone votes no. 8 to 20, motion to table fails.
Okay. Tabling motion fails. Back to the original referral. Any further discussion?
Yeah,
Legislator Morelli?
I would like to say something.
Legislator Morelli?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the commissioners, am I correct that this is a $220,000 add for the remainder of the 2020 budget?
hear the answer. I think they're muted.
Through the president, yes.
Thank you. And then through you, Mr. President, as these are permanent appointments, I assume that we're talking, that this is approximately $500,000 a year then in additional salaries and benefits. Is that correct?
Through the president, yes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Legislator Mafucci?
Yep, I just wanted to explain my vote. I'll be voting no. And I'm voting no because this is likely going to be a tax increase. And if I'm going to vote for a tax increase, I need much more information. If I had that information, as my colleague Mr. Baines had said, I might support it because I look for other ways to offset the large increased costs we're going to have next year in this budget line. I will be voting no, as I cannot support a tax increase without doing all the math. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Barra.
Legislator Barra.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate it. I want to start by saying, as most people in this legislature know, I have a thing against matters of urgency in general. I typically ask why this is a matter of urgency. And I was shocked that that question is yet to be asked. So through the president to the board of the commissioners of the Board of Election, why is this a matter of urgency? Why are we dealing with it now as opposed to 15 days from now?
Through the president, because we are in need of these new employees weeks ago. And there will be a backup as to getting them found, the right people found for the jobs, and processed through the system in order to get them to start. But it truly is urgent.
Thank you. Through the president, I don't deny it's urgent. I recognize the fact that, if you're dealing with changes and there's executive orders coming down the line, that those are challenges, and I appreciate that. I also recognize the fact that, you have work to do, and this may help in that process. I recognize that. But that kind of leads me to ask the next question, which is when do you intend to have these positions filled by through the president?
Honestly, as soon as possible. We don't have a deadline.
How soon do you think you get the first person processed through the president?
If I found someone tomorrow, I think it's at least 2 weeks before you can get someone actually on the payroll.
Thank you. I suspect you're right. And I also suspect you'll probably find someone pretty quickly. These are popular jobs, and I recognize that. But again, we're only talking about a 2-week delay, and that is not going to severely impact the primary process. Now, you mentioned earlier that the funding put aside for personnel and benefits goes up and down based on the year. And you mentioned the presidential year is, in fact, one of the most challenging ones. It's where the price is the most expensive, which makes sense. Most ballots come in, most paper needs to be processed, and all that good stuff. But I did my own math on this, and when you mentioned it would be about $500,000 annual cost for these positions, I suspect you're a little bit high. I suspect it's a little bit lower than that. But this is what we're talking about, a permanent, increase, as Legislator Morelli mentioned. And, the interesting thing to keep in mind about this, I looked at the 2020 budget, which was a presidential year, which maxed for benefits and payroll and all the good stuff at $3.3 million approximately. This is essentially a 10% permanent increase. Okay, and what that means is it's not going to go up and down. That 10% increase is on the max. So every year from now, we'll be taxing all the municipalities and villages and towns more, no doubt about that. And so I agree there's some, concern about we're rushing through this. And I'm not happy about that. There are no job descriptions. I'm not happy about that. And you indicated repeatedly, as you should, that you don't have any specific candidates in mind. But if you found someone tomorrow, you could get them hired in 2 weeks. Okay. All these positions, with the exception of maybe the senior trainer, are they all supervisory positions through the president?
Through the president, yes, to some degree, they will be supervising others.
Thank you. And I'm going to have to ask because I tried to find out earlier and I don't know. So the supervisor of training and recruitment, on which side of the house is that? Through the president.
So, through the president, when LaShawna and I sat down and talked about our needs, we don't have a strong preference on who gets which of the 15s, except that currently there are more Democrats working in data and less in training. So we should, and if we can, we would like to have a Democrat working in the training position and a Republican working in the information services part.
Thank you. But at this point in time, you're telling me through the president, you just can't determine that yet, depending upon what candidates show up. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So this is going to get more complicated then. So I'm just going to go down the line then, going down to the level 10s. Okay, the supervisor of absentee voting, the senior trainer. Do we know which side of the house they're going to be on?
No, same answer, I would say. Right now, there's 2 people from each party working absentee voting, so that would be an uneven split. If we put one more person in absentee, that would be 5 people, so it would split one way or the other. And the senior trainer would be more likely a Democrat because we have more people in training on the Republican side than the Democrat side.
Okay, so what you're telling me then, through the president, is that of all those working in absentee voting, moving forward, most likely there's going to be a 3-2 split in favor of the Republicans?
Well, it's got to be in favor of one or the other through the president. I'm not sure who it would be in favor of.
Well, through the president to the administration, well, to the commissioners, that's only if we actually approve this, actually. If you didn't add someone, the imbalance would not occur. That I find to be a bit disturbing because as I went through the Board of Election positions, and I will not do this here and now, because clearly it's too detailed. This is something that should be done at a committee meeting, which we're having in about 20 minutes from now. So if we'd gone through the regular process, we could actually have the time to do this. But I went and looked at the 2020 budget and how many positions were allowed and allocated for the Board of Elections, and it's 51, which of course automatically brought to my mind, that's not even. And in fact, that shall continue. So I'd like to know, not now, but by the next June meeting, of all the positions listed, which ones report to the Republican commissioner and which ones report to the Democratic commissioner. I have a better understanding of what's going on over there because it's unclear to me what is going on. Okay, so without worrying about, well, it matters. One of the questions I was going to ask, and you can't answer, is these are supervisory positions, but do we know who will be reporting to which new supervisor? Is that possible to answer without knowing if these are Republicans or Democrats through the president?
Through the president, just because you are a Republican in the office does not necessarily mean you report to a Republican supervisor.
Well, no.
And also through the president, the same could be said for a Democrat.
Absolutely. But what I'm asking is not who's reporting to. We don't know who the two is going to be through the president. You've indicated that we don't know who's going to be the supervisor of training and recruitment and who's going to be the supervisor of information services. It goes one way or the other. And the other different numbers of people reporting to who will be the training recruitment supervisor and a different number to the information services supervisor. Do you know, or is that not determined yet?
So through the president, we sat down and ensured that when we added all of these positions, that it would be equitable to both sides. Allowing them to be team leads would allow them to come to the table when we're managing the various phases of the election. So for example, in an right now our department is structured and you won't be able to tell through the title of who is doing what because right now we just have a supervisor for our voter registration. And that's it, and her title doesn't even indicate as such. However, when we meet, even though there's not a quote-unquote second supervisor on the floor for voter registration, we still meet with the most senior person that's in our voter registration department. And we also meet with the person that's title is designated, so to speak, as the supervisor on the Democratic side for voter registration. So we'll always have a balance because that's what the, yes.
If there's members from the administration not participating in this portion, if you could just please mute your phone to prevent the echo. Apologies.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Legislator Baines.
I wasn't done yet. I'm sorry. I was saying thank you for
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, Legislator Baines threw his hand up. I thought you were done.
Oh, no, I was just, it was that awkward pause. My apology. I just have a couple more questions, and then I'll
I had a few of those in my life.
I've had very few. Just kidding. My question is, you mentioned, somebody mentioned that we have approximately 4 times as many seasonal workers as we usually would have. And looking at the Board of Elections, that number is 4, according to the budget from 2020. And so we have about 24 now. And is that correct, through the President?
24. Is that correct?
Through the president, yes.
Thank you. And through the President, you mentioned also that it was really difficult to fill these positions that are 3 and 5 tier, group, because they're low paying, as low as $13, $14. And so my question for the commissioners is it possible to provide an increase in these rates, or is that something that's bound by civil service? I just, for my clarification, because my obvious solution is, hey, pay them more, but maybe it's not possible. If you could provide some clarification, then I'd appreciate that through the President.
Sure, through the president, we would have to change the grades of everyone who worked here in order to increase their salaries.
So through the President, I understand.
So it's not as.
Go ahead.
It's not as simple as just wanting to raise someone's salary and being able to do it.
Right. So through the President, what you mean then is if you're going to raise, I don't know, someone in group 5, you would by implication then have to raise someone in group 6, 7, et cetera, all the way up the line. Is that correct, through the President?
In theory, yes.
Okay. How about in practice, through the President?
It would be fantastic through the president if we could do that, but I don't think that that's realistic.
Oh, you mean from an expense point of view, correct, through the President?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'll just summarize my vote now. When I first learned of this referral, which was earlier this afternoon, my initial gut reaction was I don't have a huge issue with it in particular, simply because I know the Board of Election has a lot of work to do. I know this is a challenging time, and I know that not just the COVID-19 situation, but all the electoral law changes that have been occurring over the past couple of years are going to make things more difficult. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have to deal with it, deal with the situation. It doesn't mean that at all, but it's going to be more difficult. So I thought, okay, it's not unreasonable to want more assistance with that. But at the same time, what I didn't realize when I first saw that, I thought this was going to be for the meeting of the whole, a committee meeting, where we would get into the details of all this, talk about it, and then have a chance for the administration, or in this case you, answer questions either now or with a little research in 15 days at the full ledge meeting, where we would then vote on it and pass it or not. But that's not what happened. This is a special meeting in of itself to get this through quickly. And I have severe difficulties with that because it is going to be a tax increase for Monroe County. And it's going to be across the board and it's permanent. And I'm not so sure this is a good time to be doing that when we know the county as a whole is going to have some serious fiscal issues. No matter how frugal we are, it's going to be some serious fiscal issues. And I don't think this is a very frugal move, to be honest. Okay. And so my final question, which I should have asked before, and I asked elsewhere and I didn't get an answer because I think we forgot about it. But my question was, and perhaps you can answer this, and I'll leave it at that, is why did this come, and I'm not sure who to address this to, come as a referral from the minority and majority leaders as opposed to from Adam Bello, the county executive, who typically sends referrals to this body on behalf of all the other executive branch entities, such as the Board of Elections or the Sheriff's Office or Public Defense, whatever. Why is it through the majority minority leaders and not the county executive's office, the president? I suspect the administration can't answer this because they probably didn't know about it before today.
We can answer it. Go ahead, Jack. Give him. Go ahead.
All right. Based upon research, it was determined that via state election law that the addition of positions was delegated to the legislature, as well as the charter initially delegates the creation and abolishment of positions to the legislature.
Okay. Then I have one last follow-up question. I apologize. And this question is actually for the county law department. Would you concur with the president?
Mr. President, if you can give us one moment, please.
Good evening. This is John Bringwag, County Attorney. Through you, Mr. President, it is correct that the legislature has the authority to create and abolish positions at the Board of Elections.
Thank you. I'm done. Thank you.
Legislator Baines.
Thank you. I'm going to explain my vote. The legislature of the county is responsible for creating these positions. That's just been made very clear. The legislature had no notice of this proposal whatsoever until several hours ago. We just conducted a discussion where we found out that we have a overwhelmed and disorganized department by its own description, and yet the plan to organize them and underwhelm them is just as disorganized. We have absolutely no job descriptions, and we don't have a coherent vision for going forward. Plenty of anecdotal comments. And let's keep in mind that $500,000 in salary in the public sector. I was the president of a union for 24 years, and I'm well aware of this because everybody criticized me for it. Also involves another 12% in pension costs, another $15,000 per year in healthcare benefits and other benefits. So when we're talking about $500,000 a year, we're definitely talking with supports and office equipment and space. We're talking $750,000 a year. It absolutely beggars belief that my friends in the legislature who claim they're fiscal conservatives believe that this is the way we ought to go about spending $750,000 next year and $7,500,000 over the next 7 or 8 years, because these legacy costs escalate every year. And for that reason, I'm voting no. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I'd like to explain my vote.
Go ahead, Legislator Hasman.
I'll be voting no for this. I understand and I appreciate the need for the Board of Elections to modernize. However, I agree wholeheartedly with my colleague Legislator Baines that you're asking for a large sum of money with no data and no plan, and it's unconscionable, and that's not how we should do business. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any further discussion. I think we'll go to a roll call vote.
Mr. President? Mr. President,
Who's that?
this is Legislator Wilcox.
Oh, I don't see you there. Okay, Legislator Wilcox.
I know, I apologize. I did the raised hand, *9. I'd like to explain my vote. I'd like to explain my vote, Mr. President.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Mr. President, I'm going to be voting no on this, and I really wanted to support it, and I'll tell you why. My father worked at the Board of Elections for nearly 25 years, and I know how difficult it is to do that job right around election time. And I know that there are a number of changes made in the election law that will, in fact, require the Board of Elections to have additional staff. However, I cannot, in good conscience, vote for this without having been briefed. There was every opportunity to have briefed us on this. It's our Board of Elections. It's bipartisan. We all should have been briefed. I would have, and probably would have been, a yes had I understood this better. I again would ask, and I think it's probably too late because we've already made a motion to table. A point of information, are we allowed to make another motion to table, Mr. President?
You can make it, but it's going to get overturned, so why waste the time?
Okay, so, well,
I don't think you changed anybody's mind.
No, I don't think I have either, but here's the thing. If we did do this, we could do this tomorrow, but we need to be briefed first. So I would ask that we make a motion to table and that we do this instead tomorrow. It's a Zoom call. We've done many of them. We've done these on short notice. We can continue to do them on short notice. So I will make a motion to table if it's in order, Mr. President.
Second.
Give us some money.
Okay, let's go through a whole nother roll call vote.
Just give us a minute to do the research.
We're gonna
Just one moment.
Mr. President, this is Legislator Boyce.
Legislator Boyce. Wait, but hold on one. Get on the floor, Legislator Boyce. Let's wait. Okay, we have a motion to table. Do we have a second? Did we have a second?
Yes, Legislator Baines, second.
Okay, we're gonna go to roll call vote. Yes upholds the tabling.
Mr. Brew.
No.
Mr. Felder.
No.
Felder, no.
Mr. Alcoffer.
No.
Mr. Ansello.
No.
Mr. Ansello votes no. Ms. Barnhart.
Yes.
Ms. Barnhart votes yes. Mr. Broth.
Yes.
Mr. Broth votes yes. Mr. Baines.
Yes.
Mr. Baines votes yes. Ms. Boyce.
No.
Ms. Boyce votes no. Mr. Delahanty.
No.
Mr. Delahanty votes no. Mr. DeFlorio.
No.
Mr. DeFlorio votes no. Mr. Dondorfer.
No.
Mr. Dondorfer votes no. Mr. Flagler Mitchell.
No.
Mr. Flagler Mitchell votes no. Ms. Hassman.
Yes.
Ms. Hassman votes yes. Mr. Hebert.
No.
Mr. Hebert votes no. Mr. Keough-Lacy.
No.
Mr. Keough-Lacy votes no. Ms. Lamar.
No.
Ms. Lamar votes no. Mr. Lee.
No.
Mr. Lee votes no. Mr. Mafucci.
Yes.
Mr. Mafucci votes yes. Mr. Marionetti.
No.
Mr. Marinetti votes no. Mr. Morelli?
Yes.
Mr. Morelli votes yes. Ms. Roman is excused. Ms. Smith? Ms. Smith?
No.
Ms. Taylor? Ms. Smith votes no. Ms. Taylor?
No.
Ms. Taylor votes no. Mr. Turp?
No.
Mr. Turp votes no. Mr. Wilcox?
Yes.
Wilcox votes yes. Mr. Wilt?
No.
Mr. Wilt votes no. Mr. Udelson?
Yes.
Mr. Udelson votes yes. Mr. Zale?
No.
Mr. Zale votes no. President Carbone?
No.
President Carbone votes no. 8 to 20, motion to table fails.
Okay, motion to table fails. Let's go back to the original referral. Let's go to a roll call vote on the original referral.
Mr. President, I have one question, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, Legislator Zale. Is it a different question?
It is, Mr. President, and I appreciate you wanting to move on. I just have a couple questions. Through you, Mr. President, to the elections commissioners, my question, it could take me back to 2019, when all of these additional mandates came because of early voting and a couple of the other things that took place. Was there any promise or was there any notion that maybe we would be compensated by the state or federal government for additional costs that were incurred because of some of the changes in the election laws?
Through the president to Legislator Turp, unfortunately, Commissioner Booth nor I were working here in that year, so I do not know. As your honorable body knows, you did receive a grant for the COVID part of elections this year, and I believe you voted on that at your last meeting, so did that assistance for this year, but I don't believe we did last year.
Thank you. This is Legislator Zale. We do look very alike, but no problem on that. I suppose my question stems from the fact that there are a great number of changes that have happened since the elections in 2018. And due to these mandates, maybe I'll ask you the question, if we didn't have the 50 changes in 2019 and the 15 changes to the executive order this year, do you believe that these positions would end up being necessary? Or do you believe that they're necessary because of these changes in election law, regardless of which side of the aisle you are on?
We together believe that they are necessary because of the changes.
And by the changes, last I promise, through Mr. President to the Board of Elections, and by the changes you mean these mandates that are ultimately unfunded by the state, correct?
Correct, Legislator Zale.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Legislator Morelli, just a quick question through you to the administration. Am I correct in that didn't New York State provide the funds associated with several of the changes related to early voting, as well as some of the additional expenses that the state knew Board of Elections offices around the state would contend with, through you, Mr. President? Isn't that correct?
Through the president, the funding that was provided, from our understanding, from the state to each of the Board of Elections in the state. Most of the funding went to the purchase of the new equipment that you now see the board using for the early voting and the election day.
So through you, Mr. President, then it's fair to say that the comment of unfunded mandates is actually completely inaccurate.
No, because it didn't pay for any of the bodies.
That is not, through the president, that is not 100% accurate, because the funding that was received, from what I understand, was only for technology. It didn't pay for any of the training. It didn't pay for any of the personnel costs or any other personnel costs associated with administering early voting or the changes that would happen for Election Day.
Okay, well, all due respect, Commissioner, it was referenced by another legislator tonight that the changes were completely unfunded mandates. And when you've confirmed for me that the state provided the funding associated with, even though it was just the purchase of the equipment, it sounds like the state then gave the money, which means that it's no longer unfunded, it's actually funded. So I just want to clarify that, as apparently other legislators didn't have that information. So I wanted to clarify that. So thank you very much, Mr. Baker.
Mr. President, Legislator Udelson.
Okay, Legislator Udelson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, I just wanted to explain my vote. I would love to be able to support this. I've been hearing for quite a long time, as long as I've been part of this honorable body, about the need for more help at the Board of Elections. But I am troubled by the last minute presentation of this and the lack of detail about the aspects of these positions. I wish that motion to table had passed, because I would like nothing more than to get some additional information and then be able to support this. But since that's not the case, I will be voting no. Thank you.
Okay, then can we go to a roll call vote now? Roll call vote.
Mr. Brew.
Yes.
Legislator Brew?
Yes.
Mr. Brew votes yes. Mr. Felder.
Yes.
Mr. Felder votes yes. Mr. Alcoffer.
Yes.
Mr. Alcoffer votes yes. Mr. Ansello.
Yes.
Mr. Ansello votes yes. Ms. Barnhart.
No.
Ms. Barnhart votes no. Mr. Broth.
No.
Broth votes no. Mr. Baines.
No.
Mr. Baines votes no. Ms. Boyce.
Yes.
Ms. Boyce votes yes. Mr. Delahanty.
Yes.
Mr. Delahanty votes yes. Mrs. DeFlorio.
Yes.
Mrs. DeFlorio votes yes. Mr. Dondorfer.
Yes.
Mr. Dondorfer votes yes. Mr. Flagler Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. Flagler Mitchell votes yes. Ms. Hassman.
No.
Ms. Hassman votes no. Mr. Hebert.
Yes.
Mr. Hebert votes yes. Mr. Keofit-Lacey.
Yes.
Mr. Keofit-Lacey votes yes. Ms. Lamar.
Yes.
Ms. Lamar votes yes. Mr. Lee.
Yes.
Mr. Lee votes yes. Mr. Mafucci.
No.
Mr. Mafucci votes no. Mr. Marinetti.
Yes.
Mr. Marinetti votes yes. Mr. Morelli.
No.
Mr. Morelli votes no. Ms. Roman. Ms. Roman is excused. Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Smith votes yes. Ms. Taylor.
Yes.
Ms. Taylor votes yes. Mr. Turp.
Yes.
Mr. Turp votes yes. Mr. Wilcox.
No.
Mr. Wilcox votes no. Mr. Wilt.
Yes.
Mr. Wilt votes yes. Mr. Udelson.
No.
Mr. Udelson votes no. Mr. Zale.
Yes.
Mr. Zale votes yes. President Carbone.
Yes.
President Carbone votes yes. 20-8, motion to adopt passes.
Okay, very good. Jack.
Item number 3, motion to discharge, convene, and commit, providing that file numbers 200177 through 200195 be discharged from the Public Safety, Recreation, Education, Planning and Economic Development, Human Services, Transportation, Intergovernmental Relations, Environment and Public Works, and Ways and Means Committees, providing that the legislature convene a committee of the whole, and providing that file numbers 200177 through 200195 be committed to the committee of the whole.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by legislator Brew, seconded by legislator Zale. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. At this time, we will recess the May 26, 2020 special meeting of the Monroe County Legislature and will convene the committee of the whole. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Alcoffer. Mr. Alcoffer, you present?
Here.
Mr. Alcoffer is present. Mr. Ansello?
Here.
Mr. Ansello is present. Ms. Barnhart?
Here.
Barnhart is present. Mr. Broth?
Here.
Broth is present. Mr. Baines?
Present.
Mr. Baines is present. Ms. Boyce?
Here.
Ms. Boyce is present. Mr. Brew?
Here.
Mr. Brew is present. President Carbone?
Here.
President Carbone is present. Mr. Delahanty?
Here.
Mr. Delahanty is present. Ms. DeFlorio?
Here.
Mr. Florio is present. Mr. Dondorfer?
Here, sir.
Mr. Dondorfer is present. Mr. Felder?
Here.
Mr. Felder is present. Mr. Flagler Mitchell?
Here.
Mr. Flagler Mitchell is present. Ms. Hassman?
Here.
Ms. Hassman is present. Mr. Hebert?
Here.
Mr. Hebert is present. Mr. Keofet-Lacy?
Here.
Mr. Keofet-Lacy is present. Ms. Lamar?
Here.
Ms. Lamar is present. Mr. Lee?
Here.
Mr. Lee is present. Mr. Mafucci?
Here.
Mr. Mafucci is present. Mr. Marinetti?
Here.
Mr. Marinetti is present. Mr. Morelli?
Here.
Mr. Morelli is present. Ms. Roman? Ms. Roman is excused. Ms. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Smith is present. Ms. Taylor?
Here.
Ms. Taylor is present. Mr. Turp?
Here.
Mr. Turp is present. Mr. Wilcox?
Here.
Mr. Wilcox is present. Mr. Wilt?
Here.
Mr. Wilt is present. Mr. Udelson?
Here.
Mr. Udelson is present. Mr. Zale?
Here.
Mr. Zale is present.
We will now hold the public forum. Mr. Clerk.
No one is registered to address the committee of the whole, nor were any written comments submitted.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. You have the minutes from the April 29th, 2020 meeting of the Committee of the Whole before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. We will now proceed with new business. Will the clerk read the next item on the agenda?
Referral 200177, acceptance of a grant from the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York Municipal Facilities Program, acceptance of a gift from the Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter Number 20, Rochester, New York, Inc., and acceptance of a gift from the Warriors of Freedom Memorial Committee for the design, construction, and maintenance of the War on Terror Memorial in Highland Park South.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by legislator Alcoffer, seconded by legislator Hebert and legislator Wilt. Is there any discussion?
This is Legislator Barroth.
Legislator Barra, you have
Thank
the
you, Mr.
floor.
President. Appreciate it. I had a few questions for my constituents about this project, and while I very much enjoyed the groundbreaking the other day, I just want to make sure I could answer them for this constituent. The first is, am I correct that all entire funding for the construction and planning of this monument is done by the Dormitory Authority and then the two committees? There's no funds coming from the county. Is that correct, through the president?
Mr. President, did you hear? This is what I just said. This is Nick Stefanovich.
Yes, Nick, do you have an answer to his question? Is there any funding coming from the county?
Yes. Yeah, I must have been on mute, sorry. Through you, Mr. President, that is, Legislator Broth is correct. There is no funding coming from the county.
Thank you. And through the President to the administration, a quick follow-up, and I know this is a minor issue, but I did indicate to my constituent that the county park employees would probably be cleaning it occasionally, but that's about it. Is that correct through the President?
Through you, Mr. President, the county employees will maintain it, as well as the War on Terror Memorial Committee will also be maintaining it. If there's any damage or anything, we are in the process of setting up an endowment fund to provide for that.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Mr. President, Legislator.
Any further discussion? Legislator Hebert.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple quick comments. First of all, I thought that the Memorial Day usage of this coming monument was extremely appropriate. As a member of the Vietnam era veterans who came home to a, shall we say, less than welcome, we should never have that happen again. And certainly our young men and women who have served in things from Desert Storm and on after post 9/11 deserve such recognition. And I want to commend everyone associated with this, with their efforts. It has taken years, and it is a very appropriate action to be taken. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Legislator Hebert. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0178, amend resolution 69 of 2020 entitled Accept Maintenance Jurisdiction of approximately 0.137 acre of right-of-way for former New York State Highway Route number 401, Rapids, Rochester, Town of Gates, and release maintenance jurisdiction of approximately 0.321 acre of right-of-way of the former New York State Highway Route number 401, Rapids, Rochester, in the Town of Gates to the state of New York to amend the acreage in section 2.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Wilt, seconded by Legislator Smith. Is there any discussion on this?
Legislator Smith.
Yes, Legislator Smith, you have the floor.
Yep, through the president, why, to the administration, through the president, why is this amendment needed?
Through the president, Tim Murphy, Director of Real Estate. There are 4 different parcels that are part of this area, and the wrong acreage was utilized in the original resolution.
Thank you.
Mr. President, Legislator Barworth.
Yes, Legislator Barworth.
Thank you. Through you to the administration, I admit ignorance here. The referral states that releasing maintenance jurisdiction will enable future private development. How does releasing maintenance jurisdiction enable future private development?
Through the president, there is a proposed development for the area. The state of New York has already gone through an auction process for one portion of it. And then there will be future referral that comes to this honorable body to release the rest of the land that is needed for future development of this area.
Thank you. And through the President's administration, what sort of development is being contemplated in this planning?
Through the president, the current proposal is for a convenience gas station car wash.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item, please.
Referral 20-0179, authorize the acquisition of interest in real property for the Middle Road Culverts Replacement Project between Erie Station Road and Rush Henrietta Town Line Road in the town of Henrietta.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by legislator Wilt, seconded by legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President, it's legislator Barworth again.
Yes, legislator Burrow.
Thank you, sir. Through you to the administration, I know this parcel houses a small church, or at least did. Was eminent domain necessary to acquire the interest on either of these properties?
Through the president, Tim Murphy from Real Estate, no, they were not.
Thank you. And as a follow-up, through the president to the administration, when will the environmental quality review take place?
It has been completed.
With positive results, I assume, through the president.
Through the president, that is correct.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, Legislator Boyce?
Yes, legislator Boyce. Go ahead.
Yes. Through the president to the administration, can you tell me if any of the work has been completed thus far or started?
Through the president, Tim Murphy, no, none of the work has been started at this point.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0180, authorize the acquisition of interest in real property for the Whitney Road Culvert Rehabilitation Project between East Linden Avenue and Oak Hill Terrace of the town of Parrington.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by legislator Wilt, seconded by legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
This is legislator Barworth.
Yes, legislator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration, the same two questions regarding eminent domain and the environmental quality review process.
Environmental review has been done. No eminent domain will be necessary.
Thank you, sir.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0181, authorize the acquisition of interest in real property for the North Road Highway improvement between Scottsville Tri Road and Scottsville Road in the village of Scottsville.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Legislator Wilt, seconded by legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. President, legislator Brew.
Burrow? Legislator Brew.
Yes, my question is, during the course of the engineering for all of the property acquisition referrals that we're talking about right now, was the property acquisition, was that known upon the start of the engineering phase? Or during the engineering phase, I should say?
This is Tim Murphy. I would defer to someone from the Department of Transportation to answer the question.
Through you, Mr. President, I would ask if Tim Freeler is on the line or anyone from Transportation. Mr. President, if you could give us a moment, let me see if I can try to locate Mr. Freeler.
Yeah, go ahead. Take your time.
I think it's finally cooling off outside.
For some somebody doing this meeting from outside?
No, but I should.
Out. 75. Possible thunderstorm.
Mr. President, this is Don Crum.
Hi, Don.
Mr. President, this is Don Crum. How are you?
Good, Don.
May I ask,
Did you
through the
need question
President, may
repeated?
I need the question clarified.
Mr. President.
Good evening, this is Tim Freeland from Department of Transportation. Can you hear me?
Tim, hold on one second. Mr. President?
Yes.
I have Tim Freeler on my phone. Let me see if this will work here. Let me try this here. Tim, go ahead, please.
Yes. This is Tim Freeler from Director of Transportation. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
Yes, I can restate my question for the benefit of Mr. Freeler if that's necessary.
Legislator Brew, I believe he heard the question. So,
Okay.
I heard the question.
Go ahead.
During the preliminary design of the project, after all the mapping and design is complete, we evaluate the need for easements based on the preliminary design and draw up the maps and needs for easements at that time.
Okay, through the president. So I understand the need for easements is, so is this acquisition of interest in real property, is that defined as being granted easements?
These easements would be either temporary easements for during construction or a permanent easement if some of the features are going to be installed just outside the right of way. So those are all based on the design that's presented. Tim has the maps there and could say which ones are temporary and which ones are permanent.
Okay, through the president. Yeah, I guess I misunderstood the language of the referral. I actually thought it was a purchase of interest in real property as opposed to easements in property. So, I'm all set. Thank you.
Good. Any other discussion on this?
Yes, Mr. President. Legislator Barth again.
Go ahead, legislator.
Thank you. And I'll just ask if you're not speaking, if you can mute your mics, that'd be helpful. I'm getting a lot of feedback over here. So my question is the same as before regarding whether or not the environmental quality review took place and the question of eminent domain. Thank you.
Through the president, Tim Murphy, there is no eminent domain necessary, and the environmental quality review has been completed.
Thank you very much.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0182, authorize the acquisition of interest in real property for the Willard Road Culvert Rehabilitation Project between Mendon Center Road and Clover Street in the town of Pittsford.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Legislator Wilt, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Barth here.
Go ahead, legislator.
Thank you. Just for the final time, same question. Eminent domain and did the environmental quality review take place? Thank you.
Tim Murphy, once again, environmental review has been completed. I have not received the offer from John Willard back yet. I'm hoping to do so later this week, but I do not have it in hand.
Okay. But it's your expectation through the president that you'll most likely have this before the full ledge meeting, correct?
That is my anticipation, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0183, amend Resolution 206 of 2016 to accept additional funding from the New York State Department of Health and extend the time period and increase the intermunicipal agreement with the City of Rochester and the contract with Cornell University for the Childhood Lead Poisoning Primary Prevention Program.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Hebert, seconded by Legislators Alcoffer and Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0184, amend Resolution 212 of 2019 to accept additional funding from the New York State Department of Health and extend the time period for the Healthy Neighborhoods Program.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Hebert, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0185, authorize a contract with Monroe Community College to provide a certified nursing assistant training program for new employees at Monroe Community Hospital.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
By Legislator Hebert, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion on this referral?
Mr. President, Legislator Barworth.
Go ahead, Legislator.
Thank you. Through you to the administration, I do like this referral very much, and particularly the providing incentives somehow to have trained nurses stay here for a longer period of time. My question is how is the 2-year employment requirement enforced?
When CNAs, through the president, this is Alyssa from MCH. When CNA trainees go through the program, we ask that they confirm that they will remain employed with the facility. However, we cannot guarantee that they will, and CNA turnover in this field is upwards of 75%. Of the CNA trainees that have already been through the program, of the 28 that completed, we do have 25 who are still per diems with the facility and 5 full-time CNAs that completed the program.
Thank you. So I understand. Then what this is essentially doing through the president is to verbalize or normalize an expectation that by going through this program, we expect that you'll stay, but it's kind of on the honor system. Is that correct through the president?
Through the president, this is Alyssa. Yes, it is very challenging to try to enforce with employees staying. So we ask that they do commit to the facility, but we do not enforce that. There is no way currently to enforce that.
Do they sign a contract?
We did institute in January that they do sign a contract.
So just to follow up on that through the president, but even though they sign a contract, they can break the contract, correct, through the chair, president?
Through the president, yes, they can break that contract. From previous experiences at other facilities who also offer this program, the amount of manpower and the cost to attempt to go after any CNAs that do not fulfill the requirement is not really worth it to the facility due to the low cost of what the facility actually pays for them to complete the training.
I think you're muted, Legislator Barat.
Oh, sorry. I didn't want to encourage you to do such a thing. I just wanted to see what was actually happening. I think it's a wonderful idea to encourage people to stay, to normalize, a commitment to staying along, but ultimately people have lives and, they're going to do what they're going to do. But just by normalizing, I think is a positive step. And so I commend you. Thank you.
I have a comment. This is Linda Hasman.
Go ahead, Legislator Hasman.
Mr. President, through you to the administration, I just want to commend the administration for this program. CNAs are some of our lowest paid and unsung healthcare heroes, and I think this program is a great idea, and I'm happy to see it move forward. So I guess, Mike, I do have a following question. How do we let more people know about it? How do we publicize it in the community?
Through the president, this is Alyssa. The first round that we tried to attract folks to this program, we put out an announcement via Facebook, and we actually had about 300 people come to the facility to apply for this program. Granted, not many people made it through the pre-employment process. With the fact that we cannot have folks in the facility with visitation restrictions in the nursing home, we do have other means, which would include Facebook, LinkedIn, and we plan to utilize those. I don't think it's going to be a problem as far as finding candidates, but the selection process does limit us to those that can pass the pre-employment process.
That's all. Thank you very much.
Legislator Hebert.
Go ahead, Legislator Hebert.
Through you, Mr. President, to the administration, is this funding the administration of the program, some creation or modification of the program, or is it funding students directly, or something else?
Through the president, if I understand your question correctly, the tuition for a CNA program is $2,200 at MCC. Per New York State, CNA trainees cannot pay for that program. Through other funding sources, that is where each student will receive some sort of aid or funding to help pay for that program, and then the facility would acquire the remainder of that cost.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, approximately how many CNAs will this fund?
Going through the math, it would be about 333 roughly with the $100,000 ceiling. Granted, I don't believe that we will send that many through. They do offer classes that range from 8 students to 24 students. So depending on the need of the facility, we can utilize those class sizes.
And thank you. And through you, Mr. President, one final question. How many CNAs are currently employed at MCH?
Through the president, let me take a look at my notes.
Through you, Mr. President, I'm not looking for a precise answer, just a rough estimate will do.
We currently have 21 vacancies. We operate CNAs at 5 on a day shift, 4 on an evening shift, and 2 on a night shift. However, we also have to complement with agency staff at this point in time. So if you think total numbers, that's 12 per day. I'd say roughly 100.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
I have a question.
Legislator Felder.
I'm just curious, doesn't the REOC do this training for free?
Through the president, I do not know what REOC's program is.
I'm fairly certain that they do. Most they have to buy, I think, is uniforms and books, but the training is free. That's just a thought.
And through the president, as far as the demand for CNAs, one program is likely not to produce enough CNAs for the community. As far as CNAs themselves, they are a very high demand profession currently, and they, again, with a very high turnover rate. So they usually are classified as stayers, switchers, and leavers. So those that stay at a facility, those that switch facilities due to a variety of reasons, and those that leave long-term care because of the demands of long-term care.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries.
Referral 20-0186, acceptance of a grant from the New York State Office for the Aging for the Age-Friendly Planning Grant Program.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Legislator Hebert, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item.
Referral 20-0187, authorize a contract with CHA Consulting, Inc. for design services for the Rehabilitate Taxiway F and Connecting Taxiways project at the Greater Rochester International Airport.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Dondorfer, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0188, acceptance of reimbursement from the New York State Unified Court System for improvements at the Hall of Justice as requested by the New York State Unified Court System.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Dondorfer, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0189, authorize the sale of county-owned tax foreclosure property located at Shangri-La Lane in the town of Webster.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Delahanty, seconded by Legislator Hebert. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Hebert.
Legislator Hebert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration. This is a 1 acre property zoned residential. It's vacant land. It is in a pretty nice section of Webster. It's assessed at $28,000 by the town. Can you tell me why Monroe County Real Estate has it valued and is offering it for 30% less than its assessed value? Also note that Webster is not a full assessment town.
Through the chair, Tim Murphy. The assessments in the town of Webster haven't been done in 15, almost 16 years. The accuracy of those, I'm not going to speak to. We did a research as to what similar type properties that are not approved in the town of Webster without public water we're selling for, in the market. Believe that this is a fair market value.
Follow-on question through you, Mr. President, to the administration. I've been keeping an eye on these types of sales or purchases, and it seems that 100% of the time, county real estate charges less than whatever town has assessed property at, or pays more than whatever town has assessed property at. There are, 3 or 4 potential explanations. It seems that either the towns are really bad at assessing property, or that Monroe County Real Estate isn't necessarily as accurate in charging for it. Is there correction to be made in the future?
Through the president, I'm not quite sure I understand your question.
All right, let me try again. I have checked every one of these this year as they have come up. In each and every case, if we were buying the property, we paid more than the assessed value. If we were selling the property, we sold it for less than the assessed value. finding it hard to believe that's coincidence. What is going on here? Maybe an easier way to put it.
Through the president, I'm not aware of anything that we purchased. So I can't speak to that. I'm not going to, I'm not going to question, assessments. Our valuation is based on, current market data. I feel that, with over 30 years of real estate experience, I can review market data and come up with what is a reasonable market value, to sell property at. All of these properties have been through at least one auction without success, with a lower opening bid amount than what we're selling it for.
Through Mr. President, just to the administration, I'm going to be keeping an eye on these types of things, and thank you very much, sir.
Mr. President, Legislator Boyce.
Go ahead, Legislator Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. President. To Mr. Murphy, can you provide the comparables that are available? You mentioned there might, comparisons on the open market. Can you provide those to the legislature, please?
We would be happy to do that.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0190, 2020 to 2024 Strategic Plan and 2020 Annual Action Plan for Housing and Community Development in Suburban Monroe County and grant submission to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
By Legislator Smith, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good. Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0191, acceptance of 2 grants from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act Provider Relief Fund Health and Human Services Stimulus Phase 1 and 2 at Monroe Community Hospital.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
By legislator, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0192, acceptance of 5 grants from the New York State Office for the Aging for the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act and the Families First Coronavirus Response Act and amend Resolution 401 of 2019 for authorization to contract for Monroe County Office for the Aging programs 2020-2021.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
By Legislator Hebert, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Legislator Brew.
Okay, Legislator Brew, you have the floor. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. President, to the administration. Is the Director of the Office of the Aging, would that be a position that's currently on hold due to the budget considerations, or is that still an open requisition?
Did the administration get that question?
Hi, can you hear me, President?
Now we can,
President,
yes.
you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is
Yes,
Steve Newcomb. I'm the acting director of the Office for the Aging.
Do you need the question repeated?
I think the question was whether there was a permanent director in place. Through the
And if that
president.
position is on hold,
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Mr. President, this is Jeff McCann. I apologize. I thought I had my phone unmuted, but evidently I didn't. Yeah, Mr. Newcomb is serving in an acting capacity. He's been with the department for many years. I'm sorry, I don't know how many offhand, but he is serving in that capacity, and there are several positions that we are having individuals serve in an acting capacity, and that was part of the list that, or part of what we had presented in terms of our informal briefing that we had of a vacant position that, again, depending on the funding and circumstances, may or may not be filled, but that has been a position that's been vacant for the past 5 months. And I might also add that Mr. Newcomb is serving admirably in the acting capacity.
Yes, through the president. Thank you, Mr. McCann. I appreciate that.
did that address your entire question, Legislator Brew?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Legislator Barroth?
Go ahead, Legislator Barroth.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the administration, I have a couple questions about this referral. On page 1 of the vendors listed, it includes the Catholic Family Center of the Diocese of Rochester to provide in-home services. And this is right after it's attached to the referral itself. And it mentions in it that part of the role is to reduce the wait list. What is the wait list? To the president.
Through the president, the wait list consists of older adults waiting for services. These funds would alleviate that wait list. And the predominant service that the New York State Office for the Aging is directing us to provide is in-home contact and support.
Thank you. Through the president's administration, how large is the wait list currently?
For in-home contact and support through the Catholic Family Center, I think the wait list is minimal, but if you want a hard number, I can get that for you.
If you could buy the full ledge meeting, that would be great. And to follow up, on the same vendor, I looked at their POSIF, which I forget what it stands for, the purchase order something or other. And wait list is not mentioned in there. I wondered about that. It doesn't have to be, but there's also a significant error in the POSIF as well in its measurables. It measures transportation trips. It says there were 30 proposed, there were 2 successful, and there was a 90% success rate. And if you look at any other measurables, the numbers add up. For this one, something's wrong. You'd have to have 27 successful for a 90% success rate. You know what's going on here?
No, I do not have the POS form in front of me, but I will make sure that's corrected. And just as an aside, part of the unmet needs in-home contact support provided by Catholic Family Center is passed on to University of Rochester Medical Center Home Care to provide a home-delivered meal, for instance.
Okay.
But that is a typo, and that will be straightened out.
Okay, if it's just a typo, that's fine. But if you could check to make sure, I'd appreciate that. And then, in addition,
I will do that.
Thank you. On page 2, I'm just going to reference this general. There's a couple vendors who have yet to be identified, so they're like to be determined by an RFP process. And there's a couple of them. What's the timeline for these RFP processes where we don't have a vendor in place now?
Well, it's a very good question, and to the president, any vendor that we contract with that is COVID related, these agencies have already been approved in our 2020 blanket. So to contract with these agencies has been approved up to the point of $150,000 for COVID related services that would end after the major declaration disaster has been announced that it's over.
Okay, that makes sense. And then finally, and this is just, it's my ignorance showing here, so I'll just deal with it. Page 4 to 5 of the vendors. One of them is the nutrition services for senior centers in Monroe County. And it lists Monroe County and a bunch of towns. it does not list the town of Brighton or East Rochester. Why is that, through the president?
Well, through the president, the senior centers that we sponsor are directly related to our nutrition program. Years ago, East Rochester was part of our nutrition program, which means a lunch every day. And they pulled out roughly 10 years ago. Brighton has never been, as far as my memory serves, been part of the nutrition program that would deem them as a Monroe County senior center.
Okay, so they have their own programs in place, presumably, through the president.
Through the president, yes. That does not mean, however, we do not provide services as needed, such as case management through Lifespan.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Legislator Hasman?
Mr. President, I need to declare an interest. I'm an employee of the UR Medical Center.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0193, acceptance of a grant from the United States Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs for the fiscal year 2020 Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funding Program.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
By Legislator Boyd, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0194, authorization for intermunicipal agreements with the City of Rochester, towns of Brighton, Chi-Lite, Clarkson, Gates, Greece, Hamlin, Henrietta, Arundecoit, Mendon, Ogden, Parma, Penfield, Parrington, Pittsford, Riga, Rush, Sweden, Webster, Wheatland, Town, Village of East Rochester, Villages of Brockport, Churchville, Fairport, Hilton, Honeoye Falls, Pittsford, Scottsville, Spencerport, and Webster, local school districts, and local fire districts for reimbursement of COVID-19 related expenses in accordance with the CARES Act.
Move it, Mr. President.
Second.
By Legislator Alstoffer, seconded by Legislator Delahanty. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Legislator Baines. Legislator Baines.
Legislator Brew, I think, called in first.
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you. And I'd just like to say a few words regarding this referral. From the onset, the local response to the COVID-19 pandemic has been community-based, with all levels of government working together to best protect the community. There have been many municipalities, school districts, fire districts have gone beyond expectations, often at their increased costs. The legislation we are proposing would provide much needed relief to our municipalities and help alleviate the burden facing local taxpayers. As this legislator knows, we accepted $129 million in federal CARES Act funding to aid the community response to COVID-19. According to the guidelines issued by the United States Department of Treasury, Monroe County can share these funds with municipal partners to cover authorized COVID-19 related expenses. However, as has been stated repeatedly, the Treasury Department prohibits the county from using the funds to fill revenue shortfalls. While we know the efforts are underway to free up these funds for revenue shortfalls or to procure new funding for revenue, there is nothing concrete or guaranteed. However, these funds exist today and can be used immediately. Monroe County has a longstanding tradition of sharing resources and services with our local government partners. Members of the Republican caucus and I have talked with town supervisors and other local elected officials, and it is clear that they are facing financial hardship. Looking towards the future and phased reopening, there will be new and unforeseen expenses facing local governments. These funds provide them with the resources they need to safely provide essential services to residents. The legislation before you today would authorize the county executive to enter into intermunicipal agreements with the state and local governments so the county may begin reimbursing them for authorized expenses.
Mr. President, Legislator Baines.
Go ahead, Legislator Baines.
I direct this to you, Mr. President, to Majority Leader Brew, Vice President Marionetti, or any of the signatories on this referral. And thank you for the referral. This is an interest, by the way, of Democrats as well. Is it the case that these agreements are strictly a matter of the county executive's discretion?
Legislator Baines, I believe that is correct.
Thank you. And is it the aim of this legislation to support as many of these entities in as uniform a way as possible?
Through the president, through Legislator Baines, that is correct.
Well, you know, I'd like to make a suggestion that between now and our regular meeting, we collaborate in a bipartisan way to consider this legislation or this referral to reflect the fact that we expect the federal government to free up the CARES money to replace revenue. And we know that many of these municipal entities had very, very small COVID expenses, whereas each and every one of them has been affected by the revenue side, particularly sales tax. So not necessarily as a motion tonight, but as an appeal to bipartisanship and also to include our partner, our number one partner in government, the county executive, to come together and consider whether or not this legislation could keep us in the most nimble position to replace revenue lost to our partners due to the pandemic at such a time as we can do so and have permission to do so. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Yes, Legislator Felder.
One of the troubling things about what has happened in Washington is that they've passed 3 pieces of legislation aimed at helping with the pandemic. And in none of those 3 pieces of legislation did they do anything for state and local governments. State and local governments, particularly the small cities and the towns and villages. And we were promised that when they did the when they added more money to the funding for the small business loans, our senators promised us that along with that would be money for local governments, and also some flexibility with the CARES Act money they received. It has not happened yet, and until something happens, I don't particularly trust what's going on in Washington D.C. because the Republicans in Washington don't seem to be inclined to help local governments, and the Democrats bill that they passed, they declared dead on arrival. And I wouldn't count chickens before they hatch. I think that right now the money we have is the money we have, and anything else is just speculation.
Legislator Morelli.
Legislator Morelli.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, to the Majority Leader. Mr. Majority Leader, did you, when you say you contacted partners in local government, do you have an estimate as to what those combined costs would be, and what of the 129 million would go to each of the municipalities that you've listed in your legislation?
Yes, to the president, to Legislator Morelli. We did reach out to a number of our local towns. In almost every case, I can state that the costs incurred were not of any great significance. Okay, now do I have dollar amounts? No, I do not. But I generally believe that we are not talking about anything here that's going to break the bank in terms of relieving the towns of some of the costs that they've incurred for COVID.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Legislator Hebert.
Legislator Hebert. Legislator Hebert.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Mr. Baines, he made a statement that I'd just like some clarification on. He said that we expect the CARES Act funding, the 3.0 CARES Act funding, to be turned into ability to fill lost revenue or revenue shortages. Where does he get that expectation?
Thank you for asking me that question, legislator. Well, you know, I think it comes from studying what's happening and recognizing that once this pandemic is spread across the entire country and affects the entire country, we're going to see a more bipartisan understanding of the effects on local governments. And this CARES Act money is more useful to local governments when it's unrestrained. So it's a lot more difficult, legislator, to get the government to give you more money, but it is a little easier to get the government to change the rules of the game for the money you have. So I'm probably indulging in a little bit of speculation here, but based on my study, I'd like us to be ready to respond in the event that happens. Thank you for the question.
You're welcome, Mr. President. A couple comments, if I could, on that. The act itself specifically states it cannot be used to fill holes. It's not just the Treasury Department's interpretation. We also had a comment that no money has been promised to local governments. And in fact, in the CARES 3.0 Act, any government with 500,000 or more personnel, people, citizens, and I think even non-citizens in it, were allocated specific funds, which is where the $129 million came from. And in the CARES Act, it explicitly states that the entities receiving that can essentially subordinate that money to other local taxing authorities, which is, I think, exactly the kind of support that was mentioned doesn't exist. This legislation does leave the expenses to be covered within the control of the administration, which I think is appropriate. It also has to be spent by 12/31/2020, and it has to have been spent between, I believe it's March 31st of 2020 and December 31st of 2020, and it cannot have been something that is budgeted for. As was stated, the House did pass a fourth bill. The Senate has said it is not even going to take it up. And just by way, I just did some checking today just for the heck of it. Since May 15th, when the House of Representatives allowed proxy voting to take place, there have been what you and I would consider 6 working days. They've been in session 3 days for a grand total of all 3 sessions of less than 30 minutes. So I don't get the impression this stuff is going to move quickly, if at all. I will be voting in favor of this, and I do believe that is appropriate. I do believe that there is a high likelihood a 4th stimulus package will be passed at some point in time, and I do believe that that may cover revenue holes, but I do not believe there's any chance that this specific CARES 3.0 Act funding will ever be allowed to cover revenue holes. And thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any further discussion?
Yeah, Legislator Brew, just an additional point I'd like to make in that this referral actually authorizes the county administration to enter into an intermunicipal agreement. This legislation simply just authorizes that. It's up to the administration to define the terms and conditions of that agreement with each municipality, school district, or whatever the beneficiary might be, along with those amounts. So I would like to just let the legislative body beware that it's not about to become a blank check scramble in this that does have a high degree of discretion from the administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 20-0195, mortgage tax distribution.
Moved by legislator Delahanty, seconded by legislator Hebert. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item carries. Are there any other matters to come before the committee of the whole? Seeing none, the committee of the whole stands adjourned and shall rise and report in the same manner as the legislature's standing committees. The May 26, 2020 special meeting of the legislature is reconvened. There being no unfinished business, Legislator Brew.
Yes, this legislative body stands adjourned until Tuesday, June 9th, 2020 at 6 p.m.
Thank you.